Hello again and welcome to our mini-series on playing drums in worship. If you haven't checked out the other previous videos, I'd love to encourage you to do that as we're building up through each video. As we spoke about in the first video, as a drummer you are mainly responsible for two things: timing and dynamics. Nobody else in the band has the dynamic range that you do as a drummer, and so as we look at a song and think about the musical journey in that song, you have a huge role to play. Yes, from a rhythmic perspective, but also from a dynamics perspective. If we were to just all play 100% of the time, it would be abrasive and musically uninteresting. We wouldn't have any sense of arrangement and journey, and the things that should be in focus at particular points wouldn't be in focus. So as we come to think about knowing what to play and when, the best place to start is to listen to the original recording. That's where I start whenever I'm asked to play a new song. What does the drummer do on that record? That's where I take my initial inspiration from. Often songs will have drum tutorial videos on YouTube. You can check them out as part of your preparation. You can also ask what the worship leader wants, if they have anything in particular in mind that they want you to play. They might have some nice ideas. If it's up to you to think about something to play, here are some things to think about. My starting place is to think of a song progression. Let's take a classic worship style song that starts low and builds. It's unlikely that you're going to want to come in really big at the start. Instead, you want to start small and build as the song builds. There are a bunch of different techniques and styles that we'll use to help us do that. Let's start at the top, the intro of the song. Say, for example, there is just a piano or electric guitar riff to start the song, really low down. You don't want to be playing a beat, but sometimes you'll want to give a little bit of something just to glue everything together. So you might just want to start on the ride on quarter notes, something like this. Where do you go from here? Well, take one more step along the build journey. For some songs, you might want to come in verse 2 with a beat or a tom groove, which we'll talk about in a second. Sometimes you might want to do a cymbal roll into the first chorus and then crash out. Again, think about the arrangement as a whole and how you can serve that arrangement. So what beats can you use? Well, use what the song needs. What kind of beat do you imagine as you listen to the song? Here are a few ideas. So let's imagine that you started out the song with just a bit of ride. You've done a cymbal roll into the first chorus and crashed out, and then you've transitioned into a beat for verse 2. Now what? Well, we want to grow the song and help it to reach its climax. How we do that in a lot of worship music is using a build. There are a few different techniques that we can use to build, so let's quickly look at them. The first is a classic straight build. Oftentimes this will be kick, snare, and ride. And less often, kick, snare, and floor tom, or on rare occasions you can use the kick, snare, and the hi-hats. Or even kick, hats, and ride. Effectively what you're doing here is playing each of the subdivisions of the bar, increasing volume as you get towards the big point. Oftentimes it's also nice to start with slower subdivisions and then use faster subdivisions as you build. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to start with just quarter notes on everything: kick, snare, and ride. Then I'll keep quarters on my ride and my kick, but change the snare to eighths. Then I'll change the ride to eighths, and then eventually the kick to eighths too. And I'll build my volume at the same time. Let's have a look at that. Did you see how the energy built up? It grew into a loud, big point. This is a great technique to help you move the song from a quiet place to a big place. And you could do it on the floor tom too, something like this. Or if you want something a little gentler, you can use the ride and the hi-hats. Okay, cool. The second building technique is to using a tom groove. Now, there can be so many different variations of this depending on the rhythmic feel of the song, but I'll give you an example. Basically, this is using a combination of the toms, the kick, cymbals, and snare to accent different beats and form a groove. The first time you could do just toms and kick, then bring in some cymbals, then bring in the snare on the third or fourth beat of the bar. Let's take a look at how that might sound. You see how those toms took us from a gentle, low bit and then brought it all the way up to a big climax point. Have a listen to some worship songs and take notice of the different patterns that they use in these tom builds and become comfortable with the different grooves and subdivisions that are common in our genre. The last technique is just a very quick and simple one. Say you're playing a groove on the kick, the hi-hats and the snare. To build up, all you have to do is move to using more of the shoulder of your stick on the hi-hats and slowly and gently open the hi-hat using the pedal more and more as you build. This will make the hi-hats go from tight to loose and trashy, which will help to build into the next section. Let's take a quick look at that. So there you go. Hopefully that gives you some tips and tricks to use when you're next playing. Join me in the next video when we'll talk about what to do in between songs. See you there.